All right, let's dive into a really fascinating geopolitical puzzle today. We're talking about how Cambodia, one of China's closest allies in Southeast Asia, has developed this surprising and very, very public infatuation with Donald Trump. And just to give you a sense of the sheer intensity we're talking about, get a load of this observation from Phnom Penh. This isn't just some quiet, behind-the-scenes admiration. We're talking about government and business leaders out there literally likening the US president to a deity. I mean, that level of praise, you gotta take a closer look, right? So this is the central puzzle. How does a country where you see Buddhist monks marching down the street with photos of Trump, whose prime minister actually nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize, how does that same country also remain one of China's tightest partners? It's a real head-scratcher, and that's exactly what we're going to unravel. So first, let's just get a feel for what this Trump fever actually looks like on the ground, 9,000 miles away from Washington, D.C. Because these aren't just empty words. The support is tangible, it's public, and it's pretty surprising. The contradiction here is just stark. You've got revered monks leading a peace walk for Trump. You've got a Nobel nomination from the prime minister himself. I mean, these are incredibly powerful public displays of affection for an American president, and it's all happening in a nation that is deeply strategically tied to Beijing. So why? Why is this all happening? Well, it turns out it's not just some random fascination. You can really break the reasons down into two big categories. First, there's the cold, hard strategic calculation, what we'll call the head, and then there's a genuine ideological connection, the gut. Let's start with the strategy. If you look at the pragmatic incentives, it's pretty clear Cambodia is making a very strategic play to re-engage with Washington. They're looking for some serious economic relief, a way to hedge against being too dependent on China, and frankly, a break from all the human rights pressure they were getting from previous administrations. And a huge driver here is a massive economic win. Cambodia managed to successfully negotiate its U.S. tariff rate down from a crippling 49% to just 19%. That is a huge, tangible benefit that suddenly puts them on par with a U.S. treaty ally like the Philippines. But here's the thing, this isn't just about economics. There's also a deeper, kind of ideological connection going on. As this quote suggests, Cambodia's leadership sees a familiar style in Trump's way of doing things, one that's, less concerned with democratic norms and really resonates with their own authoritarian approach. And the policy shift from previous U.S. administrations has been, well, dramatic. Where there used to be sanctions and funding for critical media, that's been replaced with a rollback of accountability. And it's a change Cambodia's government has openly cheered, basically framing it as the U.S. finally showing respect for their internal business. Of course, not everyone sees this as a good thing. This warning from an exiled opposition politician, it gives you a totally different perspective. The concern here is that this isn't a partnership of equals, but instead, it's a calculated move by an authoritarian regime to really exploit a more transactional U.S. foreign policy. So you have this simmering affinity, and then one single event comes along and just turbocharges the whole thing. A sudden regional crisis provided the perfect catalyst, turning all that quiet admiration into a full-blown public charm offensive. This sequence of events was just the perfect trigger. When the long-simmering conflict with Thailand blew up, Trump jumped in, called both leaders, and basically used the leverage of those tariff negotiations to force a ceasefire. Now, for Cambodia, which has the smaller military, this was a huge relief, and it gave them the perfect chance to shower the U.S. president with praise. And the praise from the very top was immediate and effusive. They framed the intervention as this act of a great peacemaker, a visionary move that saved innocent lives. And they celebrated it publicly with big events, like that peace walk led by thousands of monks. So all of this leads us to the big question, right? Is this a genuine pivot away from China and toward the US? Or is Cambodia just getting really good at playing two global superpowers against each other for its own benefit? It really looks like Cambodia is performing this incredibly delicate balancing act. For every step it takes toward Washington, like the lower tariffs and military drills, there's still this deep strategic bond with Beijing that remains. I mean, this is a country with both a new openness to U.S. naval visits and a Xi Jinping boulevard.
And the Ream naval base is the perfect example of this tension. Cambodia says U.S. ships are welcome to visit, sure, but officials also admit they won't have full unfettered access. And that's because satellite imagery suggests China still has exclusive use of certain facilities there, which is obviously a major point of strategic concern for the U.S.
Ultimately, it all comes down to trust. Cambodian leaders are keenly aware that U.S. foreign policy can, seesaw from one president to the next, and that perceived inconsistency means they'll probably never fully pivot away from China, who they see as a much more reliable long-term partner. So, where does this all lead? Well, in a move that kind of perfectly symbolizes this whole bizarre affair, there's a new and very political proposal now being floated publicly in Cambodia. This suggestion to name a major road the Donald Trump Highway. And that really leaves us with a final provocative thought. Is this the ultimate sign of a real new partnership? Or is it maybe the ultimate act of political fluttery in a very, very high-stakes geopolitical game?